Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Al24 Midnight News coming to you live from the capital Algiers. And these are tonight's top stories. In Gabon, the coup leaders announced the name of General Transitional President, declaring that all the institutions of the Republic had been dissolved and the results of the election have been cancelled. European Union is moving ahead with the legal groundwork to impose sanctions on the coup leaders in Niger. One Palestinian was killed in Al Khalil by the occupation forces, and the Palestinian Foreign Ministry called on the UN to classify the Zionist regime as an apartheid entity. In Russia-Ukraine conflict, Kiev drones target 6 Russian regions and Moscow promised retaliation, targeting positions of the enemy's leadership and intelligence. Hello again and welcome. First, the President of the Republic, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, Minister of National Defense, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, shared on Wednesday a meeting of the Supreme Security Council. According to the Presidency statement, this meeting was devoted to studying the general situation in the country. Opening the African continent, military leaders in Gabon announced late Wednesday that the head of the country's elite Republican Guard would lead the Central African country, hours after saying they had placed the country's newly re-elected president under house arrest. The coup leaders said in an announcement on the Gabon's state TV that the new leader, Nguma, had been unanimously chosen president of the Committee for the Transition and Restoration of Institutions.
All the commanders-in-chief and chiefs of staff, as well as the generals in second section of the Gabonese Republic, were present for the meeting. General Brice Oligui Nguema was unanimously appointed chairman of the Committee for the Transition and Restoration of Institutions, president of the transition.
In the same line of thought, a group of senior Gabonese military officers appeared on national television in early hours of Wednesday and said they had taken power minutes after the state election body announced President Ali Bongo had won a third term, according to Reuters. Appearing on television channel Gabon 24, the officers said they represented all security and defense forces in the Central African nation. They said that election results were cancelled, all borders were closed until further notice, and that the state institutions were dissolved.
On this day, August 30, 2023, with the Defense and Security Forces meeting within the Committee for the Transition and Restoration of Institutions, CRTRI, on behalf of the Gabonese people and guarantor of the protection of institutions, have decided to defend peace by putting an end to the current regime. The general elections of August 26, 2023, as well as the truncated results, are cancelled. The borders are closed until further notice. All institutions of the Republic are dissolved.
Another statement that was read on national television, the Transitional and Re-Institutionalization on Committee in Gabon said that President Ali Bongo had been given house detention and was being cared for his family and medical professionals. The committee also reported that the arrest of a son of the ousted president and the arrest of government officials on high treason charges.
Il est porté à la connaissance de la communauté nationale et
We are
internationale.
making the national and international community aware that Mr. Ali Bongo Ondimba is being held under surveillance in his residence. He is surrounded by his family and his doctors. People around him have been arrested for high betrayal of state institutions, massive embezzlement of republic funds, international financial embezzlement by an organized gang, falsification of the signature of the President of the Republic, active corruption, drug smuggling.
Also, in a different video release on Wednesday, Gabon's President Ali Bongo called on supporters all around the world to make noise following his arrest. In the short video, the leader Ali Bongo Ondimba said that he was under house arrest and that his family was in a different place.
I'm Ali Bongo Ondimba, President of Gabon, and I'm to send a message to all the friends that we have all over the world to tell them to make noise, For the people here have arrested me and my family. My son is somewhere, my wife is in another place, and I'm at the residence. Right now, I'm in the residence and nothing is happening. I don't know what's going on. So I'm calling you to make noise, really.
On the same story, France has condemned the coup in Gabon and said it desires the election result in Gabon to be respected. Spokesman of the French government, Olivier Véran, on Wednesday said that Paris was following event with a lot of attention. French Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne earlier said that France was monitoring the developments in Gabon with the utmost attention.
France condemns the military coup d'etat that is taking place in Gabon. France is closely monitoring the development of the situation on the ground and reaffirms its wish for the election results, once known, to be respected. So we are monitoring this closely.
Also, EU's High Representative for Foreign and Security Affairs, Joseph Borrell, said on Wednesday that the coup in Gabon increases stability in the region. He added that the last events happening in the region represent a big issue for Europe. The remarks were made during a one-day informal meeting of EU defense ministers in the Spanish city of Toledo.
Whole area, starting with Central African Republic, then Mali, then Burkina Faso, now Niger, maybe Gabon. It's in a very difficult situation, and certainly the ministers, today defense ministers and tomorrow foreign affairs ministers, have to have a deep thought on what is going on there and how we can improve our policy with respect to these countries. This is a big issue for Europe.
Also, Washington said Wednesday that the United States is closely watching the situation in Gabon following a military coup. White House National Security Spokesman John Kirby said that the situation in African countries is deeply concerning, calling the recent coup in Africa dangerous and reckless steps.
It's deeply concerning. We are going to watch this closely, and we are going to continue to do everything we can to support the idea of democratic ideals that are expressed by the African people.
For its part, China has called on all sides of Gabon to settle differences peacefully through dialogue and restore normal order. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin said that his country is closely following the developing situation in Gabon.
China is closely following the situation in Gabon. We call on all sides in Gabon to proceed from the fundamental interests of the country and the people, settle differences through dialogue, restore normal order as soon as possible, ensure the personal safety of President Bongo, and uphold national peace, stability, and development.
Russia also expressed its concern in Gabon's situation after the coup. The Russian presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov described the situation as worrisome at a time when the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova expressed her hope that the country would return to stability quickly.
Moscow received with concern reports of a serious deterioration in the internal situation in the friendly African country. We continue to closely monitor the development of the situation and hope for rapid stability.
The recent coup perpetrated in Gabon comes to end an era that lasted for about a century of Bongo's family domination of control in the fifth largest producer of crude oil in Africa, with exporters amounting to $5 billion annually. Mohammed Khatal in this report.
After several coups that battered African countries, it's now the turn of Gabon, a country whose population does not exceed 3 million people and which enjoys enormous natural resources.
30 août 2023.
The leaders of the coup perpetrated against Gabonese President Ali Bongo say their move aims to promote democracy and restore state institutions, thus ending half a century of Bongo's rule.
It's Independence Day. The army has freed our country. We're free and we have the right to be free and express ourselves the way we want.
I address all those who live abroad. I ask them to come back, as our country is now set free. Long live to free Gabon.
We, the Gabonese youth, we are independent. We will stand up and fight for our country. We will never bow again. We can't make the same mistake we made in 2016. We learned the lesson.
The military coup comes after controversial elections, which allowed President Ali Bongo to win a third presidential term. The number of military coups in Africa seems to surpass the number of its countries, as the continent has witnessed about 100 coups over the last half-century. In the case of Gabon, the coup is justified by Bongo family's control of power, as the opposition pushed for change in the country, which is rich in oil and raw materials. Gabon is considered one of the African countries closest to France, and what brings Libreville and Paris together makes it difficult to imagine Gabon outside French influence, which uses the close connection between Morocco and the Bongo dynasty to preserve Paris's interests in Gabon. Although the Gabonese coup leaders have not yet announced their intentions regarding France, the recent series of coups in Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger were characterized by a rejection of the continued French influence in these countries, with increased cooperation in return with other international powers.
On a different matter now, still in Africa, yet the European Union began studying imposing sanctions on the coup leaders in Niger. European Union's foreign policy officials, Joseph Borrell, stated in a press conference held at the conclusion of the meeting of defense ministers at the bloc's countries that European Union aims to follow in the footsteps of Economic Community of West Africa States, ECOWAS, by imposing the same sanctions on the military leaders in Niamey.
It's up to them to take initiatives and decisions in order to counter this military coup, and we will follow, trying to implement the same kind of sanctions that they have decided. We are moving forward for an autonomous sanctions regime to take measures against the putschists. Work has already started, and tomorrow the Foreign Affairs Ministers will advance on that.
Away from military coups now, and amid mounting international outcry, calls are intensifying to break the siege enforced by the Makhzen regime on the people of the occupied Western Sahara. These calls aim to expose the regime's violations against the Sahrawi people.
The Makhzen regime's tactics to conceal its atrocities against the Sahrawi people in occupied areas have led to punitive measures against them. A military blockade, followed by a complete media blackout, has been imposed. Despite the regime's claims of prosperity in the occupied territories, Sahrawi voices are rising, demanding an end to the siege that restricts their communication with UN bodies and other international organizations. In obvious disregard of international law, the Makhzen regime persists in denying UN Secretary General Personal Envoy Staffan de Mistura access to the occupied cities, an attempt to create confusion in communication with the Sahrawis.
The Moroccan occupation authorities continue to prevent UN bodies, rapporteurs, non-governmental organizations, international media and observers from accessing the territory. The United Nations must hold the occupying power accountable for that.
Foreign journalists are equally restricted, with the Moroccan occupation preventing their entry into the occupied Western Sahara lands. This appears to stem from the regime's fear that journalists would expose the grim reality in Al Ayoun and other occupied Sahrawi cities to the global community.
If Morocco's presence in Western Sahara is as good as Rabat says, then it would be logical to see ourselves as media people, because we cannot talk to the people in Western Sahara, nor can we see what is going on in the city of Al Ayoun and other occupied Sahrawi cities.
As the calls to lift the occupation siege resound across borders, the truth about the struggle of the Sahrawi people remains covered in a complex web of muddle and denial.
Tunisian President Kais Saied renewed his country's categorical rejection of any steps toward normalization with the Zionist entity. Saied, in a speech he delivered during a number of new ambassadors handing over the official credentials at the Carthage Palace, stressed that the term normalization does not exist for him at all, recalling the right for the Palestinian people to establish their independent state with al-capital Al-Quds al-Sharif.
Despite the fact that Palestine has ambassadors, never forget the legal rights of Palestine, the central cause to the whole nation. For those who are talking about normalization, this terminology doesn't exist in my dictionary at all. The natural state is that Palestine belongs to the Palestinian people, and that the state of Palestine is free, with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital.
The Palestinian was martyred on Wednesday by Zionist occupation forces gunfire in the city of Al-Khalil in the West Bank. Local media reported earlier that the young Palestinian man was injured before he died as a result of the deadly wounds near Beit Haggai settlement in Al-Khalil. In the same concern, the Palestinian Ministry of Foreign Affairs called on Wednesday the United Nations to classify the Zionist entity as an apartheid one on the backdrop of its crimes of various forms and methods against the Palestinian people. The ministry underscored in a statement the need for international community to bear its responsibilities in applying international law to the situation in the occupied Palestine, considering that the escalation in crimes, including house demolition and land clearing, is an extension of the open occupation war on the Palestinian political and humanitarian presence in the occupied East Al-Quds. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has rejected the request from the leader of the Conservatives, Alberto Viejo, to support him in his bid to be Prime Minister. Pedro Sánchez will seek a new term himself, according to his Socialist Party. Viejo's People's Party won the most seats in July 23rd elections, but came short of working majority and is trying to garner enough support in the lower house.
Que el Partido Socialista no va a apoyar la investidura del señor Feijóo.
The Socialist Party will not support Alberto Viejo to be Prime Minister, and I add that he has tried to convince us, but he lacked persuasive arguments with our candidate Pedro Sánchez. At this meeting, we reminded him of something important. On July 23rd, the citizens of this country spoke clearly and rejected the proposal to remove Sánchez. If there is an alliance between the right-wing People's Party and the Vox Party, there will be a possibility of forming a new government.
La composición del nuevo gobierno de España.
Now, in Russia-Ukraine fight, Ukrainian drones have attacked at least 6 Russian regions, including an attack on airport where they destroyed military transport planes. The attack was coined as the biggest drone strike on Russian territory since Moscow's special military operation in Ukraine last year. Meanwhile, Russia also launched a missile and drone attack against Kiev that was described as the most powerful strike in months leaving 2 people dead and 1 injured. Russian Foreign Ministry said on Wednesday that Ukrainian drone attacks on the Russian territory overnight will not go unpunished. Spokesperson Maria Zakharova said that drones, some of which hit airbase in Peskov, accusing the West of helping Kiev to implement them.
As you know, last night the Kiev regime conducted several drone attacks on objects in a range of Russian regions. According to preliminary information, there are fortunately no casualties due to the drone attacks. Nevertheless, Ukrainian drone attacks on civilian objects confirm the terrorist essence of the Kiev regime once again. It's clear that Ukrainian drones weren't able to fly those distances without assistance from Western satellite information. The actions of the Ukrainian regime will not go unpunished. Russian law enforcement structures are investigating and properly documenting all facts of shelling by Ukrainian militants of Russian regions and their other criminal actions.
Russian President Vladimir Putin will soon meet Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Russia, according to the Kremlin, the 2 countries have been preparing a meeting at which they are expected to discuss the developments regarding the export of Ukrainian grain. And now for more international news, let's follow this roundup.
Zionist strikes would not remain without response. Iranian Foreign Minister Amir Abdullahian said during a news conference with his Syrian counterpart Faisal Miqdad in Damascus, following a Zionist strike on a Syrian airport. The airstrike left the airport out of service 2 days ago, according to the Syrian Defense Ministry.
The former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan will remain behind bars. A Pakistani High Court suspended jailed former Prime Minister's sentence on corruption charges, but ruled that he will remain jailed as a judge had already ordered his detention in another case. The 70-year-old former cricket star has been at the center of a political crisis since he was ousted in a parliamentary vote of confidence in April 2022.
At least 4 people were killed and 48 were reported missing when heavy rains battered Jiangnan County in central China, Sichuan province last week. Heavy rainfall has been recorded in several parts of the country in recent days, and in early August, China was struck by Typhoon Duksuri, which left at least 33 people dead in the capital, Beijing.
Washington has announced restrictions on some NVIDIA AI chip exports to some countries in the Middle East. However, NVIDIA did not specify which countries were affected. Usually, the US imposes export controls for national security reasons. But it wasn't immediately clear what were the risks of exports to the Middle East, and neither the company nor the US Department of Commerce responded to a request for comment.
Hurricane Idalia made landfall Wednesday in Florida as Category 3 storm and unleashed devastation along a wide stretch of the Gulf Coast, submerging homes and vehicles, turning the streets into rivers.
While South Carolina went into a state of emergency, Idalia flooded streets of Florida on Wednesday as it slammed into the Big Bend region, where millions of residents had evacuated or hunkered down in anticipation of a dangerous surge of tidal water.
Well, good afternoon. The eye of Hurricane Idalia has left the state of Florida. The state is still being impacted by the storm's bands, and we're seeing that particularly in the northern part of the state.
The hurricane barreled then towards southeastern Georgia and has since weakened to a Category 1 storm after hitting Florida's Gulf Coast with life-threatening storm surges, leaving at least hundreds of thousands without power.
What we know so far on Hurricane Idalia, while it is still too soon to assess the total damages, we know that the storm made landfall as a Category 3, which means over 120 mile-per-hour winds and up to 10 inches of rain in some areas. And in fact, Idalia is the strongest storm to hit this part of Florida, to make landfall in this part of Florida in over 100 years.
Idalia grew from a tropical storm into a hurricane early on Tuesday a day after passing west of Cuba, where it damaged homes and flooded villages. Hurricanes are measured on a 5-category scale, with a Category 5 being the strongest. A Category 3 storm is the first on the scale considered a major hurricane, as Idalia happens to be the 4th major hurricane to hit Florida in the last 7 years.
Literally streets into rivers. With this, we reach the end. Thank you ever so much for being with us. Take care of yourself. Good night.